When did you start really having these realizations? Like, what started this journey for you out of the Christian culture tradition that you grew up in, or really just kind of what started the wheels turning in your head? What made you start asking the questions that you were realizing you had?
Yeah, so I mean, it began in my undergrad, and then it just continued on because like I would get to a place where I would like question things so much, and I finally got to a point where I was like, you know what, I gotta figure out um how I want to approach my faith, and the way in which it was presented just didn't seem to like work for me anymore. And so I basically what I wanted to do was like figure out like what does it actually mean to follow Jesus, and what did it look like for the disciples, when they heard Jesus give them the invitation, hey, come follow me. So it started like this, the wheels started turning as I was in college. And honestly, my first year out of college, I was just dealing with a lot of like anxiety and stress. Your first year out of college is weird because you go from being around your friend groups all the time. And I was a part of a really great college ministry. And so that was another one of those things where I was in a particular place that we practiced and thought about faith in a certain kind of way. And there are things that are still true about that time period, but there are things that have definitely changed of how I think about my faith from then. And so coming out of that and leading a college ministry and being a student pastor and things like that, I have thought about like, how do I want to present Jesus to people in a way that is compelling? And it's not just, believe in Jesus so you'll be saved. My thing is like, how do I present Jesus in a way that's like, this actually can change your life if you follow it? And one of the biggest helps was resources like John Mark Comer, Mark Scandrette. I mean, he's got some really good stuff. His book, Practicing the Way of Jesus, was really helpful. And that was one of the things like I'd never thought about. I never thought about Christian faith as like a rule of life and a way of life, even though like when you read the Gospels, it's kind of clear. And when you look at the disciples, it's pretty clear. So the wheels kept turning for me because I had to figure out like, okay, if I'm going to be in ministry and I'm going to teach the Bible and I'm going to do these things, I have to find a way to present this that is compelling and still true to what I believe that Jesus wants from people who say that they follow him. And so for me, it's like, some people have said like I safely deconstruct. I don't know if that's the way to put it, or I cautiously deconstruct, because I don't feel like I'm deconstructed really necessarily. I feel like that I've tried to just redefine the way in which I approach things, and I put question marks on the things that I don't quite fully grasp. And so I'm continuing to try to understand what it is I believe in different ways. But for me, the most important thing is I go back to what Jesus presents as a way of life. And that's a language that I use a lot around students and people, and anyone that has questions is like, would you be okay with just following the way of Jesus and seeing what that does in your life? So it started in college, and I still, and honestly, part of, for me, like my most growth in my faith has come because I have doubts and because I have questions. I would not want to be the same Christian that I was 4 or 5 years ago, like really into like the Christian culture and like this is how you dress as a Christian. And I live near Atlanta, and so the mega church influence in this area and what it looks like to be a Christian in ministry and things like that, I got less and less enamored with. So I just feel like that was a lot of it. School was a lot of it, and it grew my fascination. The Bible Project has been something that's really helped me a lot, and like Tim Mackey and John Collins, their stuff has really, really been helpful. And so I have grown in a more intrigued desire to read about theology and scripture and things like that. And so I feel like my doubts have led me on a journey, but the wheels started in college, continue on after I graduated and was kind of isolated some, and then have continued on now that I'm in the church world working and trying to present Jesus in a healthy way.
Yeah, it can be a completely different thing when you're in leadership in church, when you start thinking about these kind of questions, because now at least I see this from a different perspective now that I'm in a leadership role too, because people that I'm leading are looking to me to have some sort of direction, some sort of answers to questions that they have, so how do you, being in the church world, how do you lead while having those questions? How have you navigated this journey while being in a position of leadership and being looked to show people the
Yeah.
right way to go? Is there a right way to go? Or yeah, jump into that.
Yeah. So I think for me, I just try to be a vulnerable person. Like,
Yeah.
and I just try to put everything out there that way that like that no one is surprised by something that I might question or say. And like for those that are listening to this, like this is not me saying that I have a better way of figuring out what it means to follow Jesus, or that I don't believe that Jesus is salvation. Like that's not what I have doubted necessarily. What I've struggled with is the way in which Jesus has been presented, the way the Bible has been presented, the way that church organizationally has been presented, and I've seen the harm that can come from that, and that drives people away. So for me, I think that it comes from owning up to like just some of the things that just have not done well as in the Christian church. And again, this is not coming from a place of me having it figured out. This is the opposite. I'm trying to like help people understand and figure it out. But honestly, man, I don't have a perfect answer for that question of like, how do you go about that? Because at the end of the day, like not everyone is going to be in the same place as you. I think that being a person that is working through doubt, for those that are also, it's very encouraging for them. But I could also see for people that want a leader that is very, very for sure and certain, I could see that it might be discouraging for them, because a lot of times people do look at pastors as their spiritual leader, and they are. So, I mean, I can see both sides of it, but I think that the best thing is just to have humility, and just that really is it, honestly, to have humility and be vulnerable about where it is you struggle. And maybe some people that are in leadership positions, they may not need to be, if they're struggling with doubt so much so. But that's a whole nother conversation. But I think you just have to figure out where you're at personally.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, people seeing you wrestle through those questions in an honest and humble and vulnerable way is a good way of leading them. I think
Yeah.
we've grown up with so many leaders in the church who feel like they have to hide their weaknesses and their questions and their doubts, because there's just been this culture about, okay, I'm in leadership in ministry, I have to, like, I've got to know what I'm doing, I've got to have a great relationship with God, I've got to have all these practices down. And so there is just this lack of vulnerability sometimes with leadership, where people need to see you struggle as a leader, because we all have these questions. We're all wrestling through what it means to follow Jesus, the things that we believe about God, the questions that we don't realize we have. We have to be able to see people that are wrestling through those things, because it gives us hope that we can also confront those questions